This dialectical disclosure will focus on one of the most important, or might I say the most important committee of Parliament, the Committee on Public Finance and its way forward. We have the chairman of the committee and Member of Parliament, Honourable Dr. Harsha De Silva, today with us, all set to engage with you and to take up your questions and answer them. So just to remind all of you all, you can ask a question live or under the hashtag LKAskMP in Sinhala, Tamil or in English related to today's focus. And before we dive in, I also request all our listeners who wish to speak with Dr. Harsha to not wait until the last few minutes before we wrap up our session. So if you wish to speak to him, raise your hand and we will take your questions up accordingly. So, good morning, Dr. Harsha.
Good morning, Madhuri.
A warm welcome. Congratulations, you've been appointed as the chairman of the Committee on Public Finance. So, I thought I will start from a question from one of our tweeps, Lishan. So, Lishan, if you're joining in, so we are going to start our spaces from your question. And I think it would be a good start for our discussion as well. He had asked about the roles, the responsibilities, powers and the composition of the Committee on Public Finance. So if you can give a brief insight into that, what should the public expect from the Committee of Public Finance?
Great question. Who asked it?
Lishan.
Lishan. So Lishan, this is what's called the standing orders. It's how Parliament works. What are the rules and regulations? What are the committees? What are the responsibilities? And so on. So 121 of the standing orders says the following: there shall be a committee to be designated the Committee on Public Finance, consisting of a chair and 11. Now it has been increased to 21 and subsequently 5 more have been added, nominated by the committee of selection, provided that the chair shall be a member of the opposition. So it's unique in that in these standing orders there are multiple committees that have been established, but only one specifically says that the chair should be from the opposition. So that is how I, as a member of the opposition, has been appointed chair. Even though this is the third session of the 9th Parliament, because 2 governments changed abruptly, the previous 2 sessions, the government of the day actually overruled these standing orders. And they used the majority and said, look, we don't care what the law says, we are going to use the majority, I call it the tyranny of the majority, and appoint one of our members as the chair of the Public Finance Committee. This is no indictment on my dear friend Honourable Andrapriyadarshini, who was the chairman and he did a great job. That's separate. But he was still part of the government and had to abide by a 3-line whip of the government, as opposed to me or an opposition MP who would not be bound by a 3-line whip of the government. And that is why for greater democracy, for better debate, to look at the pros and cons, that we have this structure. So what it then says is, it gives the duties and responsibilities of this committee. I will briefly tell you, Lishan. The first one is, it says it, meaning the committee, shall be the duty of the Committee on Public Finance to examine, 1, the collection of revenue under Article 140 of the Constitution. So Article 140 of the Constitution of this democracy says full control of public finance rests with Parliament, right? So no duty, no tax, no expenditure can be approved unless a majority of members of Parliament are willing to accept it. Now, the debate, the discussion, the analysis cannot be done in the chamber. It is the duty, therefore, of the Committee on Public Finance to go into depth of all matters related to Article 148 and examine them for its appropriateness, propose changes and amendments and revisions as per the discussions that emanate at this committee, and then send it with our approval to the chamber for debate and approval. The second point is payment from the consolidated fund, which means every rupee that is spent by the consolidated fund. Now, what is a consolidated fund? Consolidated fund is the account held by the Deputy Secretary to the Treasury, which is really the fund of the people of this country. Now, if you're old enough to have a bank account, you have a bank account. And whether your income comes from entrepreneurial venture, or you're doing some job, or your parents give you a little bit of money, or what have you, sell something that you may have created, all that goes to your bank account. And from that bank account, you will spend, right? Sometimes you may spend using cash, but government can't use cash. Government has to use this account to make payments, whether it is local, foreign, anything. So we have the authority to examine every and any payment from the consolidated fund. The third is the utilization of public funds for specific purposes. So the Parliament approves various expenditures, and they spend on many things. So the utilization of public funds. Now, say some people will say, why did you build a big conference hall in the middle of the jungle in Hambantota? People ask these questions, and they're relevant questions. And then the question becomes, did you people not even look at these things? Why did you use my money, my taxpayer money, in a wasteful manner? So that falls within the scope of activity of this committee. Then the application of public funds. Every fund, how much you spend on education, how much you spend on the military. Is it necessary to spend so much, to have a granite floor in the military headquarters nearby this Parliament? Is it necessary to have outriders and vehicles full of commandos in front and in the back of certain military people running around this country? These are questions that are relevant because it's public funds, and so on. And it says the recessions and appropriations contained in the Appropriations Act for the current year, the transfer of appropriation and the unexpected balance, and so on. So what this means really is that this committee is tasked with a huge responsibility of ensuring that your tax money is spent wisely. That's what it means, Lishan, right? And one last thing, it says public debt and debt service. So we are a bankrupt country, unfortunately. It's a shameful thing to say, and it's a shameful thing for me as a member of this August Assembly to come out in public. Anybody from wherever, right, can participate in these Twitter spaces, and it's a fact. We are pretty badly off, and that's because we can't pay our debt. So technically, this committee has all the right and authority to examine all public debt and debt service. So it's a very, very broad scope, and also this is a live committee, meaning this is not looking back, but it's on a day-to-day basis going forward.
So I think, Lishan, your question was well answered by our chairman. So just to add to it, Honorable Chairman, what are the institutions that come under the Committee on Public Finance? And now we have, when it comes to Parliament, there are 3 legislative committees within Parliament evaluating external audit and reports and other finance information. So how does the Committee on Public Finance differ from COPE and COPA? So if you can just...
Yeah, so that's a good question. So you're right, there are 3 main committees. One is our committee, the Committee on Public Finance, which most people don't know about. Then there is COPE, which is the Committee on Public Enterprise. Then there's COPA, Committee on Public Accounts, both of which are fairly well known to the public. COPE is really something that everybody knows about and talks about. Both COPE and COPA are post-mortem committees, right? What it means is, like you said, it evaluates the Auditor General's report on its performance in the past, okay? And sometimes it may go deep into a particular investigation and have special COPE committees like we have seen in the past, or COPA committees. Now, these are open to the public. In fact, Mr. Sunil Handuneti, when he was the chairman of COPE in the SLparliament government, it's interesting, which reminds me something. Like I told you, COPE and COPA, the chairpersons of those 2 committees need not be from the opposition as per the standing orders, right? However, in well-governed countries, in most developed countries that has great respect for law and order and accountability and transparency, these committees are headed by opposition members, even though it is not in the standing orders. So during the SLparliament government, these were offered to the opposition MPs. So that is how Mr. Sunil Handuneti became the chairperson of the COPE. Now coming back, this became open to the public, and Professor Charita Herat continued that tradition and kept it open to the public. So that is why the people of this country have engaged with these 2 committees, and sometimes the press likes a little snippet of some small thing, and then sometimes they blow it up. And so those ones. But the Committee on Public Finance has not yet been open to the public. There is no transparency in the Committee on Public Finance. But it is actually a lot more important, perhaps the most important committee, because it's a live committee, right? It looks at how your tax money is going to be spent, not looking back and asking why was somebody's tax money spent the way it was, right? So here we can shape the decision of the government. Now, one thing that people need to understand is this is a legislature. This does not have executive power. If I was a minister, I could then make decisions. But I am not a minister. I have refused to join the government, even though many invitations have come my way for various reasons which I don't want to get into now. So here, what we can do is to influence, to pressurize, to show the executive branch of the government, look, this is right, this is wrong, and these are the things perhaps you ought to be doing. So that is how this committee differs from the other 2. But I want to add something. I am planning to change that, right? And if you have a question later, we can talk about it.
Yes. Honorable Chairman, you said that we spoke of how media-friendly COPE is, and you've stated your interest in opening the Committee on Public Finance to the press as well. And today you're directly engaging with the public through Parliament and taking up their questions, which is to come. So what I want to ask you is, when it comes to the Public Finance Committee, what is the role of the public? Like, how can, so we are, this is like a two-way communication process, so we are giving them all the information, we are opening it, so how can they participate?
Madhavi, I must first congratulate you and your team, because this is the first time this type of innovation has taken place in this institution. I've been a member of this parliament for 12 years, and this is really the first time. And it's good that this parliament is becoming modern, and it is opening itself to the public, which is what this is all about. So I hope this continues, and I wish all success. Now, coming to the opening the COPF to me, the public through media, and how they can participate. It is the chairperson's prerogative whether to open it or not, and therefore I have taken a decision to open it, which will happen. So now I'm in the process of speaking to development partners who are going to support us with the technical capabilities that we lack at the moment. People who don't know this beautiful building designed by late Jeffrey Baba, there is of course the chamber where all 225 of us sit. Then there are committee rooms. There are two big committee rooms. Committee room 1 is where usually the government group meets. Committee room 2 is where the opposition group meets. Then there are small committee rooms. This is one such committee room. This is called committee room 7. COPE and COPA have their own dedicated committee rooms. The COPF does not have one. So we are now speaking with the speaker to dedicate one of those rooms to COPF. Others can always use it, but we will have priority. And in one of those committee rooms, we will now fix the audiovisual capabilities to live stream and so on, right? And then once that is done, we will have to learn from COPE and COPA sort of the ethics and how much information, sometimes some information need to be kept in camera so that it does not go out. Sometimes things are so sensitive that they need to be protected, but I would try to be very specific about what those are, because I believe in the right to information and transparency. And the whole Aregalia was all about that, and that all 225 of us should be actually dumped in the lake just behind us, because people don't really know what is happening in this parliament, right? If people appreciate, or other people know, they will appreciate the work that goes in. And so this is in that context also to strengthen the people's faith in this democracy and the legislature by letting them see what is happening, at least as a first step. And the second step is then engaging the public. So no one still has really gone to that step, right? So there is one-way communication, a live stream from here out to the public, but there is no way that the public can come back to us to a committee. This is something that I will be looking at because engagement is always good. And engagement, if it can be done sort of live on the spot, it would be great, right? So I plan to study some other countries, how they have done these things, and then hopefully learn and implement some of those good practices here. One other thing is that when Honorable Sumandran was the chairman of this committee, as an opposition MP during the Yapalane government, he had taken this committee physically outside Parliament to 3 places during the pre-budget discussions. And I don't exactly know what the 3 cities were, but they went there, they called the Public Finance Committee meeting in the District Secretary's office. So that was the first time Parliament actually sat, because sitting of a committee is sitting of Parliament. So the first time the Parliament sat outside of this building, and it had happened 3 times during the pre-budget discussions, but we plan to create more of those town hall type discussions so that the general public could be able to participate in a more meaningful and more constructive way in legislating in this country.
Right. Thank you, Honorable Chairman. So I think we are in an age and an era where innovation and new ways of making the Parliament more public-centric is required now more than ever. Which is why I believe that all our listeners, we have so many joining in, can also contribute. Perhaps they might see differently than us, and it might add value to what we do. So you have an opportunity, so please raise your hand and we will take up your questions. We have a lot of questions coming under the hashtag LKAskMP, which I will be taking now because I want to give more time for the public questions and give them more time with you. So meanwhile, if you want to directly speak to the Honorable Chairman, now is your chance. Raise your hand and you can directly speak to him and ask your question. So we have a question, Honorable Chairman, from Dinidu Dialvis. He says, forgive my ignorance, does the committee have powers to take nudge point direct to legal action? Are any of the directives of the committee binding?
Dinendu's question, right? Okay, Dinendu, some of those, no, the standing orders does not at the moment allow the directives of any of these committees to be, what's the word I'm looking for, sort of an order almost to, for example, prosecute somebody, right? That's what he's asking, or that's what people are asking. Okay, you find that this fellow has robbed here, this fellow has robbed there, why can't you take action against him, why can't you prosecute him, right? So that power does not, no committee has that authority. However, I am no longer a member of the co-op because of this new appointment. But during the second session or the first session of the 9th Parliament, something that we discussed with Honorable Hera is that the standing orders need to be changed so that the evidence here becomes evidence admissible in court through the Public Prosecutor's office, right? So soon we will see representatives of the Attorney General's office sitting in these committees so that they can use this evidence, right? It's about evidence, right? So now, for instance, I'll give you an example of what happened. We had summoned the chairman of the Ceylon Electricity Board, Mr. Ferdinando, where he made a certain statement saying the president wanted him to hand over some development to a particular Indian company. And then the president on Twitter denied that. And then we were all in a soup because we heard what he said. It was on tape. The verbatim was there. So we called him again. We called him again and we started a new practice depending on what faith you belong to, you believe in. Like in a court of law, I mean, if you're a Christian, the Bible, or otherwise you take an oath. And now we can use that as evidence because in Parliament, what you say has to be truthful, and he takes an oath to before now everyone, before they begin the inquiry, that what they are saying is truth and that it can be used in whatever form. So we are moving in that direction, but hopefully sooner than later, evidence here would directly be admissible in a court of law.
Right. Okay. So we have another question. So Rehana is asking, will the Honorable Chairman begin a fresh inquiry into the decisions made by the former Presidential Secretary, former CB governors and Treasury officials that led to Sri Lanka's current situation? If I may add to it, Honorable Chairman, I remember we had summoned them, I think the previous month or so, before the Finance Committee, before it was prorogued. So if you can.
Yeah, in fact, it's an interesting question. Whose responsibility is it to find out what happened? And it is absolutely necessary to find out what happened so that those people who are responsible must be dealt with. Now, that hasn't really happened in this country so far. We are bankrupt. Everybody is trading allegations, but no proper investigation has been conducted. Right? This is unacceptable. The Public Finance Committee didn't initiate an inquiry, but the COPE did so, because COPE is, like I told you before, it's a post-mortem committee as opposed to a forward-looking one, and it had the authority to do so. It was going to call a special COPE, summon a special COPE to look into this. In fact, the dates were given, and those persons who were summoned had been notified, and we had all agreed on the dates of which this special commission was to sit. But unfortunately, what happened is, when the Parliament was prorogued, the chairman who initiated this process was eliminated from the COPE committee. This is unfortunate, and I hope the government changes its mind and brings back that same agenda. Whoever the committee chairman or the new committee chairman, whoever he or she is, chairperson, must continue where Honorable Herath stopped, because that is essential, right? So we don't need to replicate things. Since it has already started at the COPE, let it happen, or else perhaps we can maybe even jointly conduct it. Or if the COPE, the new chairperson, refuses to go ahead, then certainly I will take it upon this committee to do it ourselves.
So we have another question coming in, Honorable Chairman, from Umesh Moramudali. Can the Committee on Public Finance make all public finance data available in its report, or guide respective institutions to do so? For example, IRE says that they don't have some important data when RTIs are submitted. Many other institutions are the same. Can the committee address this and make it transparent?
Umesh, I think as a University of Colombo, perhaps you can participate in some discussions on this. We will invite Umesh, perhaps because I want broader consultations. So that's the point that I'm making, that there has to be greater transparency. So if we open this to the media and the public through, obviously, the media, both online and the traditional electronic media and print media, then information becomes available. You see, whatever is tabled in Parliament is public information. So I don't know why one would say that information is not available, unless of course it is something in camera which the chairman or chairperson of a committee may decide that he or she should not release to the public for very sensitive because the information will be very sensitive. Only on 2 occasions that happened in this Parliament, 9th Parliament, that is when we had summoned the Bank of Ceylon and the People's Bank to cope. The information was more sensitive, and we did not release anything to the media. But everything else had been open to the media. So, Umesh, we can have a discussion. Perhaps you can get some of your other academic colleagues and write to the Secretariat, and then we'll have a meeting here in Parliament and try to understand what your issues are.
Right. So we have someone who wants to speak to you, Honourable Chairman. Kavinda Ratnapala. Kavinda, so are you with us? Kavinda, you can now speak to the Chairman. Kavinda, I think you need to unmute your mic.
Oh, all right. Sorry, very sorry. Thank you very much, Dr. De Silva. My question to you is, it seems many a time the committees in Parliament are disbanded via the proroguing of Parliament or some other efforts by the government. What efforts will you take to ensure the work that you are done does not seem to end up in a cabinet somewhere or just lead to a dead end? Because it seems that parliamentary committees seem to replicate their efforts many a time. Thank you very much. That's my question.
No, it's a valid question, and that is the unfortunate truth, because sometimes the government with a simple majority can change these decisions. And also, like you said, the president at any point can prorogue parliament. Once the parliament is prorogued, these committees become defunct and new committees need to be appointed. So that is what has happened today. Only the Public Finance Committee, the one that I chair, because we were relentlessly arguing and demanding that this be given to the opposition, we got it. You know, we just didn't get it like that. You know, we have been asking for this both inside and outside the legislature since August 2020. And I think we need some amendments to the standing orders, that when Parliament is prorogued, not all committees get disbanded, right? And perhaps the 3 main committees should continue and remain intact. This I will take as a constructive, and try to bring it to the Business Committee or the Standing Orders Committee. We'll see what happens. Thank you, though.
Thank you, Shaman. So this is, I think this is the beauty of having, you know, conversations like this with the public, so we get to hear what you think, and your whether it be constructive criticism or suggestions, it's all warmly welcomed. I mean, Parliament is, you know, a place like that. I mean, a lot of people are unaware to that fact,
Yes.
Dr. Harsha. So we're trying to, that is what the communication department is here for. We're trying to bridge that gap. So we have a lot of you joining in with us, so it would be nice. So we have a lot of questions under the hashtag LKAskMP, but we would really love to hear from you. So if you want to directly speak to the chairman, raise your hand. So we have we have Renil Edirisinghe. So Renil, you can forward your question to the Honourable Chairman now. You can unmute your mic and speak. Ranil? Ranil, if you can hear me, you need to unmute your mic and yeah, your mic, yeah, right. Okay.
මට මිස්ටර් හර්ෂදිල්ල මහත්තයා අහන්න ඕනේ. අපි වතුකරේට මොකද්ද දැන් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ? වතුකරේ ෆර්ටිලයිසර් නෑ අපිට එක්ස්පෝර්ටින් එකට ඉකොනොමි එකක් තියෙනවා, තේ ටික යවනවා, මේවා ටික කරනවා. අපිට ඒකෙදි වතුකරේ ගැන කිසිම සැලකිල්ලක් මේ ආණ්ඩුවේ අවුරුදු 5ක් තුලවත් මට නම් දැනුන්නේ නැහැ. මොකද මම වතුකරේ නියෝජනය කරන කරුණාකාරයෙක් වශයෙන් මම කතා කරන්නේ.
ඒකට වතුකරේට මොකක්ද ඔයගලන්ට සජෙෂන් මොකුත් නැහැ. කියන්නේ එක්ස්පෝර්ටින් ප්‍රොඩක්ට් එකත් හොඳටම තියෙද්දි. කියන්නේ ඒ වලින් හොඳ ආදායමක් දැන් දෙනවා. අපිට ඒකට සම්බන්ධව ඉන්ක්‍රීස් කරන්න. මොකද්ද කරන්න පුළුවන් ඔබතුමාලා ඉදින ඉස්සරහට වැඩ පිළිවෙල.
බොහොම ස්තුතියි. මොකක්ද එතුමාගේ නම? රනිල් ඔබතුමාගේ ප්‍රශ්නෙට ස්තුතියි. අත වශයෙන්ම මේක ප්‍රතිපත්තිමය තීරණයක්. ඒ පවතින රජය විසින් ගත යුතු ක්‍රියාමාර්ග මොනවද කියලා මේ වතුකරයේ එක පැත්තකින් ආර්ථික ගැටලු අනිත් පැත්තෙන් සමාජීය ගැටලු තව පැත්තකින් දරිද්‍රතාවය පිළිබඳ ගැටලු වලට පිළිතුරු හොයන. දැන් අපි දන්නවා මේ මට ඔය වතුකරේ ආයතන කරන කට්ටිය සමග කරන සාකච්ඡාවලදී නිල නොවන සහ නිල වශයෙන් අතිශයින් මේ පහළ වැටිලා තියෙනවා මේ පාර මේ තේ මේ පළදාව. හරි. එතකොට ඒකට හේතු මම හිතන්නේ කවුරුත් දන්නවා මොකද වුනේ කියලා. එතකොට ඒ තීරණ ගත්ත පුද්ගලයන්ගේ ඒ වැරදි තීරණ නිසා වෙලාවට පොහොර ලැබිච්ච නැති එක මම හිතන්නේ බොහෝ දුරට මේකට බලපාලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට කොහොමද නැවතත් මේ තේ කර්මාන්තය දියුණු කරන්න ගත යුතු පියවර මොනවද? උදාහරණයක් හැටියට මොකද්ද තියෙන දිරිගැන්වීම මේ පුද්ගලික ආයතන වලට මේ ලීස් එකක තියෙන ආයතන නැවත වගා කිරීම පිළිබඳව ගන්න මොනවද තියෙන දිරිගැන්වීම. හරි නැවත වගා කිරීමට අවශ්‍ය දිරිගැන්වීම් දීලා නැත්නම් මේ තේ පැලේ ඉවර වෙනකම්ම මේකෙන් තේ ටික මේ තේ දළු නෙලලා අවසානයේදී ඒ ආයෝජන අවශ්‍ය ආයෝජනය කරන්න නැති තත්ත්වයක් තියෙනවා. ඒතකොට මෙතන මත කිහිපයක් තියෙනවා. මේ ජනසතු කිරීම හරහා මොකද්ද සිද්ධ වුනේ? ඒ ජනසතු කිරීම හරහා සිද්ධ වෙච්ච දේවල් නැවත පෞද්ගලිකකරණය කිරීම හරහා මේ දීර්ඝකාලීන බදු යටතේ ලබා දීමෙන් ඒ අවශ්‍ය ඉන්සෙන්ටිව් එක දිරිගැන්වීම ලැබුණාද නැද්ද? හරි. එතකොට රජය කොපමණ මේ පාලනය තමන්ගේ අතට ගත යුතුද? සමහර අවස්ථාවලදී කුඩා තේවතු සම්බන්ධයෙන් තව වෙන ගැටලු තියෙනවා. ඒව පුද්ගලිකාංශයේ තියෙන තේවතු සම්බන්ධයෙන් ගැටලු තියෙනවා. ඊට පස්සේ මේ වතු ආශ්‍රිත ජනතාව ඔවුන්ට යම්කිසි විදියකට සම්පකාර ක්‍රමයකට කෝපරේටිව්ස් හැටියට ඔවුන්ට සම්බන්ධ වෙන හැකියාවක් තියෙනවද නැද්ද? දැන් බොහෝ රටවල් ගත්තොත් කුඩා මේ තේවතු හිමියන් එක කණ්ඩායමක් හැටියට වැඩ කරලා සම්පකාරයක් හැටියට වැඩ කරලා ලංකාවේ සම්පකාරය කියන එක දේශපාලනය කරන වෙලාව මම කියන්නේ දේශපාලනය කරන සම්පකාර නෙමෙයි මම කියන්නේ දේශපාලනය නොවෙච්ච සම්පකාර ඒව හරහා කොහොමද මේ ඔන්ටර්ප්‍රෙනර්ස්ලා හැටියට ව්‍යවසායකයෝ හැටියට මේ කට්ටියට අවස්ථාවක් ලබා දෙන්න මම උදාහරණ දෙකක් කියන්න මේක තේ වලට සම්බන්ධ නැහැ නමුත් කිරි වලට සම්බන්ධයි නවසීලන්ත කිරි ගොවියන්ගේ සංගමය කියන්නේ ෆොන්ටෙරා කියන ආයතනය නිව්සීලන්ඩ් මිල්ක් ප්‍රොඩක්ට්ස් ඒක තමයි නවසීලන්තයේ ලොකුම ආයතනය ඒ ආයතනයේ අයිති වෙන්නේ විශාල ප්‍රමාණයක් නවසීලන්ත කිරි ගොවියන්ට එතකොට ඒක පාලනය වෙන්නේ වසර ගානකට සැරයක් එක පුද්ගලයෙක් ඒකේ සභාපති හැටියට මේ තෝරාපත් වෙනවා ඊට පස්සේ ඒක කරගෙන යනවා එතකොට නවසීලන්ත වැඩිපුරම විදේශ විනිමය උපයගන්නේ මේ ආයතනය හරහා කිරිපිට රට ඇරලා. බලන්න ඒක කොච්චර දියුණු වෙලාද කියලා. ඒක සමහරු නවසීලන්තේ කියලා හිතුවාම හිතන්නේ මේ එහෙම දේවල් නෑ. මේක මේ වෙස්ටර්න් මේ වර්ල්ඩ් බැංක් IMF මොඩල් එකට වැඩ කරන රටක් වාගේ. එහෙම නෙවෙයි. ඒක ලෝකෙට එකතු කරලා තියෙනවා. හැබැයි කුඩා කිරිගොවියන්ට අවශ්‍ය දිරිගැන්වීම කරලා තියෙනවා. තව උදාහරණයක් මම දෙන්නම්. ඒකත් කිරි සම්බන්ධයෙන් අමුල් ආයතනය ඉන්දියාවේ අමුල් කියන්නේ මේ සම්පකාරයක්. හරි ඉස්සර ඉන්දියාවට මේ අපි කියන වයිට් රෙවොලියුෂන් කියලා කිරි රෙවොලියුෂන් එක. හරි කොහොමද මං හිතන්නේ ඒ කාලේ ෂරාට් පවර්ලා එහෙම තමයි. ගිහිල්ලා ටෙක්නොලොජි පාවිච්චි කරලා මම දැකලා තියෙනවා ඉස්සර ඔය තාමත් මම මේ කතාව කියන දැන් අවුරුදු 15කට හරි 20කට විතර කලින් වෙන්නේ නැති මේ වැඩේ පටන් ගන්නකොට අර බයිසිකලේ නැගගෙන අර කිරි දෙපැත්තේ මේ අර ඇලුමිනියම් පොඩි මේ මොනද මේ ඒවට කියන්නේ කන්ටේනර්ස් දෙක බයිසිකලේ දෙපැත්තේ දාගෙන එනවා. හැබැයි ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන්නේ මෙව්වායේ ෆැට් කන්ටෙන්ට් එක චෙක් කරගන්න බෑ. ෆැට් කන්ටෙන්ට් එක චෙක් කරගන්නේ නැතුව මේකේ ක්වොලිටි එක ඩිටර්මින් කරගන්න බෑ. ක්වොලිටි එක ඩිටර්මින් කරගන්නේ නැතුව හරි ප්‍රයිස් එකක් දෙන්න බෑ. පොඩි දෙයයි කරේ. පොඩි ගැජට් එකක් ගෙනාවා කම්පියුටර් එකට සම්බන්ධ කරපු මොබයිල් ගැජට් එකක්. ඒක කිරියක ඇතුළට අර උෂ්ණත්ව මාපකය වගේ දැම්මහම උණ කට්ට වාගේ බලා ගන්න පුළුවන් මේකේ ෆැට් කන්ටෙන්ට් එක මොකක්ද කියලා. ෆැට් කන්ටෙන්ට් එක ආපු ගමන් මේ ස්ක්‍රීන් එකේ වැටෙනවා. ඒකටක් ගාලා ඉන්දියාව ගොඩාක් දොර තාක්ෂණය පාවිච්චි කරනවා. ඒක තැනකට යනවා. එතනින් අනිත් පැත්තට කියනවා මේකට ඉන්දියානු රුපියල් මෙච්චර ප්‍රමාණයක් ගෙවන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. ටක් ගාලා එකක් සම්පූර්ණයෙන් වෙනස් වුණා. ඊට පස්සේ අමුල් එකෙන් දැන් ලෝකෙ තියෙන ලොකුම මේ ආයතනයක්. දැන් ඒතර වතු කර්මාන්ත වතු වත්තෙන් ගත්තා. දැන් සමහර වතු වල තේ වගා කරන්න පුළුවන්, තේ වගා කරන්න බැරි ඕන තරම් හිස් ඉඩම් තියෙනවා. මේ හිස් ඉඩම් වලට බැරිද අපිට කිරි ගොවියොන්ට ව්‍යවසායකයෝ හැටියට සමහර වෙලාවට ලයින් කාමර වල ඉන්න කට්ටිය අත වශයෙන්ම වත්තේ වැඩ කරන්නේ නැහැ. නගරයට නුවරඑළියට එහෙමත් නැත්නම් වෙන කොහෙට හරි හැටන එකට නගරේ වැඩ කරන්න වෙන රස්සාවල් හොයන්න යනවා. හැබැයි නැවතත් මෙතනට එනවා. එතකොට අපි අලුතෙන් හිතන්න ඕනේ. මගේ දැක්ම නම් මේ වතු වලට තේ වලට අමතරව කිරි මේ නිෂ්පාදනය සඳහා හොඳ ඉඩ කඩක් තියෙනවා. හැබැයි ඒක කරන්න නම් කිරි සමුපකාර ක්‍රමයක් අමුල් එක වගේ ෆොන්ටෙරා එක වගේ හදලා ඒකට අවශ්‍ය ප්‍රාග්ධනය ලබා දෙන්න මේ ව්‍යවසායකයන්ට අවශ්‍ය ඒ පසුබිම නිර්මාණය කරලා ඒ වතු වල තියෙන මූලික ප්‍රශ්න තුන ඒ කියන්නේ ආර්ථික ප්‍රශ්න, සමාජීය ප්‍රශ්න, දරිද්‍රතාවයේ ප්‍රශ්න වලට විසඳුම් හොයන්න පුළුවන් කියන එක තමයි රනිල් මගේ අදහස.
රනිල් මහත්මයාගේ ප්‍රශ්නෙටම පොඩි ඇඩ් ඔන් එකක් හැටියට සභාපතිතුමා දැන් අද තමයි විසර්ජන සංශෝධන පනත් කෙටපතේ අවසන් දවස. So it is the last day of the appropriation amendment bill. So and we are also looking into another budget in November for 2023. So does the Committee on Public Finance have the power to give recommendations when it comes to to preparation of the budget, like in terms of to propose things if you feel that this is not exactly the way to go? So how does that work?
Yeah, I mean it is all up to the committee how to utilize the quote unquote power it has, because the constitution is the supreme law of this country, and article 148 of the constitution gives parliament the full control over public finance. And this is the Committee on Public Finance. So it says here, right, that it is duty of the Committee of the Public Finance to examine revenue and expenditure, right? So if that is the case, and also it says application of public funds. So the scope is available. I mean, it is how we as a committee would be able to use this authority in providing some constructive directions to the government, which is the executive, right? In our form of democracy, there is a government and there is an opposition, and there are committees, and the committees are non-political. I may be from the opposition, somebody else may be from government, but it is not a partisan debate that happens in committees. Committees are supposed to be, and most of you have seen, or many of you may have seen live streams of the COPE committee or COPA committee. You don't necessarily see the kind of animosity from a political perspective in those committees as opposed to what you would see in the chamber. There are no allegations traded across the table. It doesn't happen, right? And you probably seen, if you watch C-SPAN or something like that, you know how these committees operate in well-developed countries in terms of these committees have been for 150 years have been sort of in operation, and they have learned and to what extent they are helpful in not just legislation but in implementing that legislation through executive channels.
Right. So since, as you said, the provisions are already available and there is ample of space in order to provide proposals, recommendations for in terms of when it comes to the budget. So I suppose now that we are speaking of the way forward when it comes to the Committee on Public Finance under your chairmanship, we can expect in future a lot of constructive proposals coming in when it comes to matters as such.
I mean, people in this country kind of know my brand of politics. You know, I'm a very open, transparent, sort of, I try to speak, the truth at every possible occasion, and I try to engage. I mean, I was just telling you earlier, on our Twitter, and I want to say this, there is no one else who runs my Twitter account but me. We don't have big media teams or anything like that, right? Every tweet that you see, I would have, typed it up. 99.9%, maybe 0.1%, somebody may do it for me. But, and we have some 360,000 followers on our Twitter. Right? So that is the kind of engagement that we have been able to build and will continue to build. So why I said it is because we like to engage. On our social media pages, we engage. On our Facebook pages, on our LinkedIn pages, on our Instagram. So I'm going to bring that learning and the benefits of such discussion, I will bring that into this committee as well.
Right. Okay, so we have a lot of, tweeps wanting to speak to you. So, Oshanda Samaravikrama, you can now forward your question to the chairman. Please unmute your mic. She's still connecting. She's left? Okay. So we'll then take Mr. Chaminda Dias. You can unmute your mic and now speak with the chairman. You need to unmute. Yes.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay. Dr. Harsha, thank you for giving us an opportunity to speak to you like this. I just want to ask you, now that you've taken control of this committee, do you think that you will be able to work in good faith with the parliamentary majority, and that whether they will actually allow you to function independently? That's the first part of my question. And the second part is to ask you whether we can actually expect any kind of accountability, because we see the people that the Aragale fought against, making a comeback now back into the political scene, and that's mainly because of the lack of accountability, especially for the financial degradation of the country and the way this country's economy has been destroyed. That's why we needed the Aragale in the first place. Whether we can expect to see any kind of accountability for what happened over the last 2.5, 3 years, and whether you can work in good faith with the parliamentary majority.
Thanks for your question. Who asked the question? Chaminda, thanks for your question. I'll answer the first part first. That is yet to be discovered. So let's see. I mean, it's not going to be easy because, my position, my ideology is very different to the ideology of those people who ran this country for the last 2.5 years. In fact, I was perhaps the first person in Parliament to have argued that they should go to the IMF. That was in 2020 to resolve our balance of payments crisis, which they didn't listen, and ultimately we ended up defaulting and becoming a bankrupt country. Now, the reasons for the difference in ideology is hopefully deep-seated, I mean, one believes in something and others don't believe in that. They believe in something else. So what has now happened is that the president is Honorable Ranil Wickremesinghe. His ideology is certainly at odds with the majority of the port towards ideology. So there is a conflict there of ideologies. And we will see whether the 134 MPs who voted for RW to become president would toe his line, and whether they would admit publicly, sometimes privately, that that ideology no longer is valid. I was with Kanchana yesterday at a public event hosted by by FNF, Frederick Numan Foundation, where lots of people participated on public-private partnerships in the petroleum sector. And I applauded Kanchana for what he said. He said, well, I mean, we made mistakes and we should not have done some of the things we did. Now, the first thing is then to accept that there was something wrong, and that is why we became bankrupt, and we have to do the things differently. So now, whether that is the majority view of these 134 people, or whether Kanchana is an outlier, I don't know. I'm not in that group. But for the last 12 years that I've been here, what I've heard is not what RW as president is proposing, right? So, and the oxymoronic situation here is that while people like myself sit in the opposition, I have said publicly that I don't disagree with RW's economic plan, right? Because this is the plan that I think would get Sri Lanka out of this mess, which not only I have endorsed, it was I actually proposed a 10-point plan for getting out of the debt crisis and to create an inclusive growth model for Sri Lanka. And what RW has presented in his budget, and I haven't still seen the proposals to the IMF, are in sync, right? But politically, we are not aligned because of multiple reasons. Because in my view, RW is, I'm always quite frank in what I say, is almost imprisoned in this Porto group, right? So it will be interesting to see, forget me for the moment, whether they will support the reforms that RW himself has presented as the proposals of this government. Now it's interesting because the IMF said yesterday in its press, I read somewhere, that promises are not enough, right? The prior action undertakings would have to be delivered. That means they have to be implemented, which means you need to have the majority with you to do it, right? And you will see how we will vote this evening on RW's budget. I'm not privy to say it beforehand. You will get to know it. But we as a nation, must be able to recognize the difficult decisions that the government needs to take at this point in time. And as a committee, what I would do is to show the members facts, the truth, and I don't need to say that we have enough professionals in this country who can explain what needs to happen. I mean, we had the young academic Umesh speak about these things earlier on in our Twitter Spaces discussion. And we would welcome people like that and others to engage with the membership of the committee, and sometimes perhaps we may want to go ahead and invite all 225 for awareness kind of workshops, etc., so that the work in the committee also might be more useful. So I'm hoping for the best, but I will fight to establish what is right.
So that is actually, as Parliament, as an institution which represents without a bias, whether it be the opposition or whether it be the government, that is the whole sole intention of the communication department as well, where the public can actually engage with their people's representatives and provide with their suggestions, whether it be criticism, whatever it may be, which is why we are facilitating this platform as well. So we have, Dr. Harsha, so many questions under the hashtag coming in and so many wanting to talk to you. So if you can just, briefly address everybody. Right, so, we will now take up the question from Roshan Abesingha. Roshan Abesingha, you can unmute your mic and speak. Just if you can forward your question. Roshan? Roshan, if you can hear me, you need to unmute, Roshan. You're on mute.
Yeah, can I ask the question?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Harsha, my name is Roshan Abesingha.
Yeah, Roshan.
Yeah, Doctor, my question to you is, I actually, appreciate what you're saying, and you now just said that you're in agreement with the President's policy on the budget. But now I just read a news flash that the SJP MPs have decided to refrain from voting at the budget. So now, if you are in agreement with this budget, and if you endorse his policies, why has this decision been taken? Now, don't you think it is time that we shed differences when it comes to things like this, especially in Parliament? And also the next question, Doctor, is I fully respect your policies. And I think you're someone who's been highly, held in very high esteem. But don't you also think that at a time when the country is in a grave situation, we know that Portway is in the majority, but the country is in a grave situation. Now, if this country crashes in 6 months, right, because of the wrong policies, then wouldn't people like you regret for not getting involved and ensuring that the government is directed in the right path and the country is taken out of trouble? This is my question. These are my two questions to you.
Roshan, hi, how are you?
I'm good, Doctor. I'm very good.
Okay, so there's two-part question. One is we are. So I don't know where you saw this.
There is just a news. Other than a news came in saying that
let me see.
that you are refraining from voting.
Let me see. Somebody's given me this. SCMPs decide to refrain from voting for interim by. Okay, right.
Yeah.
All right. So now, given that the General Secretary has made the statement and it is out in the open, like I said, we are not opposed to this budget, right? I mean, usually what happens is the opposition votes against the budget. You tell me, an instance where the main opposition didn't vote.
Can I interject there, Doctor?
Yeah.
You're an educated person. You're a highly respected person, right? Of course, we do have people in Parliament, with all due respect, who doesn't deserve to sit there. Now, in a common cause, Doctor, should we take the traditional opposition stance by voting against anything that the government proposes?
So this is the point.
Someone like you, yeah, exactly. That's my point.
Yeah. So
like break the tradition.
No. So this is the point. Point is that we will not vote against the government. This probably will be, the first time that the main opposition is not voting against the budget. So we are not voting against. So that is an endorsement by not opposing it, right? I mean, there are multiple sides to this complex problem. because on the one hand the economic policies are ones that we believe that needs to happen, but on the other side look at the repression, look at the use of the Prevention of Terrorism Act to take detention orders against those people who were in the Aragalya. Look at what is happening on what happened on the 9th of May. Nobody who hammered. You recall that video of that young lady who was set upon by a bunch of thugs and assaulted. I think there was one young woman, right? Those photographs or videos are vivid in my mind. What happened to those people? What happened to those politicians? Was any action taken against them? I mean, should the voice of the people be jackbooted like this? So therefore, we have lots of criticisms against this government's the way they are handling the rights of the public. So there are many things that we are opposed to. And also in this budget, I grant that RW didn't have sufficient time to go through this whole thing. It had to be done in a in a short period of time, and in November we hope it will get changed for the better. Is that, I mean, for instance, taxing. I would want to see taxes more equitable. Now what happens is, today we will pass another 2.5% social security tax, which is a turnover tax, on top of the 15% VAT, which means a turnover tax reflects, if you compare it with a VAT, it might be about 4.5% to 5%. So you're looking at a VAT of close to almost 20%, right? And then those are indirect taxes, and those are regressive, and people who are suffering under inflation of 94% food inflation as per the government's own data last night. 94%, okay, 94% food inflation, and you whack another 20% indirect tax, I don't think is equitable, right? So there are going to be lot of disagreements on implementation, and why is it that the direct taxes are low and the indirect taxes are high? What about the middle class? I mean, people in the middle class who's graduated from poverty but not yet been able to get to a point where they don't have to worry about anything. People with kids in school, people who have to pay for tuition for their children, people have to put petrol in their small car, have to pay the bank loan, that National Savings Bank housing mortgage, want to, do a little bit of fun things, go on a trip, perhaps, take a holiday in some country, or, at least go down south and spend the weekend with the kids and family. Interest rates for credit cards are now at 36%. So what about the middle class? So equitable issues do arise. So Roshan, we, like I said, we are not opposed to the direction, and that we will very clearly show this nation, by not opposing it perhaps for the first time in a very long time, or maybe for the first time. But we need to get together and get a better deal, a fairer deal. I'll give you one last example before I stop, and I said this to Kanchana at that event last night as well, is that, okay, cost reflective prices, okay, we agree with the principle. Now, when petrol goes up from 200 to 540 or something like that, right, on super petrol or something, 500, 480 on regular petrol, or diesel and petrol. Now, how much of corruption, how much of wastage, how much of political stuffing of people is contained in that price, or rather the cost that has to then get reflected as a price to the consumer, right? So should you not first remove the corruption, the wastage, and the political shoving of people there, and reduce the cost? right? Same with the Ceylon Electricity Board. So that is why, we are agreeing with the direction, but before we agree with everything, there needs to be a lot more changes.
Right. Chairman, will briefly try to address a couple of other concerns as well. So we have Lalin Dias. You can forward your question now. Okay, Lalin, if you can very briefly.
My answers are going to be very brief now.
Yes, very brief. We have a lot under the hashtag also. Chairman, yes. Okay, Lalin, very brief, if you can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a question, perhaps suggestion for Harsha around proposals. Would the committee sort of, how can the committee create a culture where proposals, whether it's or decisions coming from cabinet or proposals before they are approved from cabinet, are properly scored in terms of, in the end, any new policy, if there is additional expenditure, someone's going to pay for it. Is there a new tax for that? Are we cutting expenditure with someone else? Are we borrowing? How does one create a culture where there is no such thing as freelancers, they say, where anyone really who, whether it's in Parliament or in ministries, when they suggest policy, create the culture where they actually tell us how they pay for it.
Okay.
Okay. Right.
How does one create such a culture? I presume we are all in agreement. We need that sort of culture. But how does one encourage such a culture?
Okay.
Right.
Lalin,
Thank
right?
You. Yeah, Lalin. Okay. Thank you, Lalin.
Lalin, really you hit the nail on the head. That is a brilliant question, which deserves an answer. This is really the problem, right? Because all these years, various expenditure proposals, various tax proposals, reductions, increases have been implemented, or before getting implemented, approved in the legislature by a show of hands, without any analytical debate. You see? Now, I give you two examples, and both of which contributed directly to the bankruptcy that we are facing today. One is a reduction of taxes in 2019, end of November. Now, before anything gets approved, I said, any finance bill, it has to be approved in the Public Finance Committee. Now, I was a member of this Public Finance Committee. Now, believe me, there was absolutely nothing, zero analysis on this tax reduction. When we asked the then Secretary to the Treasury and other senior officials, they said, no, don't worry, everything will be okay. We have plans, the roadmap is very clear, and so on and so forth. What happened? We ended up bankrupt. That is one. No analysis implemented. Another one, fertilizer ban. I recall like yesterday, sitting in this very room, right, and asking the officials, are you sure you want to do this? Have you looked at this? And it was during COVID, and on that screen we had a Zoom. We did it by Zoom, and on that one end, on the right hand side, were the officials from the agriculture ministry, whatever that, there were several ministries, state ministries, whatever. On the left hand side was the treasury. And there was this big argument between the right hand of the screen and the left hand of the screen, because they didn't know what they were doing. One person says, you never told us this is what you're going to do. Other person says, you never asked us, etc., etc. So this was on a HS code issue that the argument was being, pursued. Because if they ban that particular HS code, a whole bunch of things were going to get banned. So I said, this is ridiculous. I'm the opposition, and I am telling you, why are you doing this? And that day, the chairman, Honorable Yapa, didn't approve it. He said, no, I'm not going to do this, right? To his credit, he did that. He said, go back, right? Discuss and think whether this is what you want to do. And then they came back in 2 weeks' time and they said, this is what we want to do, go ahead and do it. And it was done. And that is how this happened, right? And I recall speaking in the chamber, the experience I had in the committee, and I was asking them, are you people nuts, right? So no analysis. The glyphosate ban. Now there, the chairman Yapa, he was also, I think, once Minister of Plantation Industry, so he had a much better knowledge of the subject than a lot of people who were sitting there, and said, no, I will not do this unless you provide us with a proper analysis. So that was not the ban. The ban had been done earlier, but some sort of revision of it. I don't recall exactly what it was, or to extend it or something like that. And then he appointed a committee of eminent people, and then the committee made some very valid suggestions. And based on those suggestions, the Public Finance Committee proposed to the government some mechanisms to deal with it, and that's what they did. So there have been some instances in the past that some analysis had happened, but our position is going to be no proper analysis. Don't ask me to sign any of these papers, which I will not do. Right now, this is a difficult role to play because the government comes at the last minute and say, oh, please, you have to approve this because tomorrow this is coming, into the chamber and we have to take a vote and approve. So then the committee gets into a very difficult position, right? But he's right that we need to create that culture. So very briefly, I'll tell you what we are going to do. We are going to create what's called a Parliamentary Budget Office. This has been a proposal first brought by the Honorable President when he was the Prime Minister in the Yapalana government, and it was pursued by Honorable Sumandiran as the chairman of the committee. And as a matter of fact, I just brought here today, I'm not going to read anything out of this, the Parliamentary Budget Office structure. The legislation has already been, so the framework has been drafted. I spoke to the President about it, and the President told me to quickly go ahead and get this done, and that he will submit it either himself or someone else to get this legislation through. So it will be called the Parliamentary Budget Office Act. And we will create the Parliamentary Budget Office, which is an independent body. Like in the US, it's a congressional budget office, or in Australia, or in the European Union, or in India, various places where good governance is held in high esteem. These things happen. So we will have proper experts who will engage with think tanks, with universities, with professionals, and then use and become a conduit to discuss matters of relevance with the members of Parliament. So we are moving in that direction, and I hope to get it done with the support of a bunch of development partners that are willing to support. And I might as well say who they are, because I think those also need to be appreciated. Or maybe we will hold on to that.
I mean, Doctor, very briefly, if you can answer. So we have...
I can't answer all these questions, yes. Too many questions.
I mean, in terms of Parliament, I'm trying to give as many as, trips as possible, to take their questions in as much as possible. Because, I mean, in fact, Doctor, I think you also agree that it's not always that they get a chance to directly, engage and get involved and speak so freely. So just bear with us for a moment. Okay, Nissan, if you can very briefly tell your left. Okay.
Dr. Silla, this is a question on the government policy on research grants. Due to a decision taken by the Cabinet of Ministers in 2018, now all research grants have to be tabled through the Parliament and through the Cabinet of Ministers. Now this has resulted in this grants having a turnaround time of about a year. It has become very difficult to get foreign research grants because the processing time is now about 1 to 1.5 years, which means we would miss the first milestone, which would fall in 6 months or 1 year, and we would get blacklisted. So due to this, I myself have given up on a 60,000 USD Google grant, and I know a number of other academics who have given up on them. Is there a way to fix this or roll this back, especially at the time of a dollar crisis? I'm asking you because you are an academic and were a member of the cabinet that initially took this decision where we have to go through the cabinet of ministers to get a grant to do research.
Okay. What's his name? Nissan sir.
Yes.
Nissan sir, good question. No, first I must correct you. I was never a member of cabinet. Nobody thought that we were good enough to be in cabinet thus far. So that goes to show, you know.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
I do know that you were a minister. But
Yeah, that's okay. So I was not part of that decision. Nevertheless, but your point is extremely valid. I mean, I think this is about, you know, this whole story about when was this decision taken? I'm not so sure. 2018. I don't know, because there was a period where there was interim government also, an illegal government. See, the thing is this, you know, people talk about conspiracy theories, right? Oh, these people are coming to do this to our country. Oh, don't take money from those people. Oh, those people are bad. They have some other agenda, you know. We are this proud country with 2,500 years of history. This is the reasoning most likely that people say that these things need to be gone through and approved and so on. So this is, in my view, a totally ridiculous piece of legislation, and that it needs to be re-looked at. And I will take this up. What you can do is, if you can send us to the Committee on Public Finance your query in a greater detail and with some background documentation, I will take it up and see how we can resolve this. Thank you for that.
Right. So something is okay. So while that's that, Amal. All right. Amal, can you quickly ask your question? Amal, you need to unmute.
Hi there, Dr.
Yeah.
Silva.
Hi, Amal.
Hi, Ash. Actually, we have met in London a few years ago when you were State Minister. My question is this.
Is it a photo?
The IMF staff level agreement mentions Sri Lanka has to deal with corruption vulnerabilities. And I'm wondering how practically you in your position in the Select Committee will address that, and how the government proposes to address that as well. And my second question is regarding how the SJB proposes to handle human rights in general and the UNHRC situation more specifically. I hear very little really about what your stance is on how to resolve those issues of alleged war crimes and other human rights violations going back several decades really. Is the SJB in favor of setting up a genuine Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Thank you.
Okay, Amal, hi again. I can't recall where we met in London, but I'm glad that we did. Perhaps we had a good chat on. Okay, answer your two questions. The first one, it's a very relevant one, corruption vulnerabilities. And I think this is the first time that IMF has actually put it down in black and white in an agreement. which means that there is the acceptance that Sri Lanka has had a lot of lot of corruption in procurement, in implementing projects, and even decisions on how to spend the large amounts of money. So there is going to be a flashlight, really directed at all government decisions that are of significant value. And I'll tell you already what has happened is there's been some talk in social media on the recent procurement of 4 odd million metric tons of coal for 2 years. And the allegation was that the company that was given the approval for almost 1.5 billion US dollars to purchase 2 years worth of coal for Norachole was not one of the original bidders, and that the documentation or the qualifications were changed midway, and whether that is possible to do so. Now, we raised this in Parliament, and Kanchana Wijayasekara, the Honourable Minister of Power and Energy, made a statement that the Committee on Public Finance should investigate this matter. And I have undertaken to do so. So therefore, we will actually investigate this. We will summon all the people, relevant people, and we will ask these questions, and then the public will get to know. That would create a greater transparency in these transactions. And I think that's the kind of way that we need to move forward. But there's something else I want to add, and that is what our colleague Honorable Eran Vikramaratne has been sort of pushing for quite some time now, and that is to establish an independent prosecutor's office, so that prosecution can be completely free of political bias, because currently only some are prosecuted, some are not. And even those prosecutions, sometimes the AG's department may want to, withdraw those for various reasons, some known and some unknown. So there is going to have to be a lot more focus on ensuring that corruption is eliminated, at least in the short run, brought down to a manageable. I don't think it's manageable, because it's like a cancer, it grows, right? You have to eliminate it somehow or the other. So we will work towards that. On your second question, I choose not to answer at this point in time, because I'm told that we are running out of time, and she wants to give opportunity to others. But I don't want to run away from this question. We will discuss this with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the 4 pillars, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was certainly one of those pillars. Accountability was another. Then third was reparations, and also the fundamental was a new constitution that would ensure non-recurrence of what happened in the past. So the SAB is very concerned, and we need to find long-term solutions to our national problem, and we will do our best to find a way out in due course.
Right. Okay. So thank you, Honorable Chairman, Dr. Harsha De Silva, for your time with us. Actually, we have a lot of others requesting to speak to you, and we have a lot of which I could not take under the hashtag LKAskMP, so I will ask Naminda to forward these questions to you, so whenever you're free you can answer, have a look at them and answer. So we were actually supposed to end at 11:30, but you have been very generous with your time, staying up until 12. So I humbly apologize to everybody for whose questions I could not take up.
I mean, if you want, I give you 10 more minutes.
Okay, so that's 10 more minutes, right? So we can have Vidya.lk. So briefly, if we can have, okay, Vidya, just, okay. So Vidya, if you can ask your question, okay, fine. So we have, right. So I was actually planning on ending this, but let's see. Okay, so we have a question from Michael under the hashtag IMF requires 2.4 primary surplus by 2024. This would require current revenue of 8% on GDP be increased to 16% over an year, or expenses will need to be reduced from 16% of GDP to 9%. Is this possible practically? Is his question.
Very good question, Michael. Huh?
Michael?
I fell off my chair, Michael, when I saw that number. I was expecting that number to be 0, not plus 2.3 or 2.4, 2.3. I do not know how that is going to be done. I honestly don't know. Like you say, I mean, how much can you increase revenue by? Given the situation that people are already in, right? How much expenditure can be cut? Like, even if we suspend all our payments, you get massive haircuts and extensions going, another 10 years we don't have to pay interest. But still we need to service multinational forex debt, and if there is no domestic restructure, we'll have to service the domestic debt. And you see, most of the numbers that were originally done at the beginning of the budget year, the assumption was government paper was as at 8%, right? But now treasuries are at 32%. So what's happened to the interest bill on the domestic side also has increased tremendously, right? So how much can you cut, right? So therefore, if you can't cut much, then you'll have to increase revenue. So this is like I said, when somebody asked me, Roshan asked me why I'm not going to support, as opposed to being to abstain, is this kind of thing. These have to be realistic, right? I do not understand how by 24 we can show a primary surplus of 2.4%. I don't know. The pain is going to be too much. It's going to be too much, right? So these are the things that would have to be really thrashed out, and before this goes, it has to come to this committee. No, I'm going to be between a rock and a hard place when it comes to this committee. So hopefully I will open it to the country to see what the government is suggesting.
Right. So one more under the LKAskMP hashtag. As public debt is examined by the Committee on Public Finance, this question is from Abdul Hafeel. As public debt is examined by the committee, what would your role be in the debt restructuring process? Would you have a say to it?
I don't know what our say is going to be yet, but like you correctly pointed out, it is a function of this committee, and this committee I don't think has ever looked at it. Debt service, right? So something that we will do almost immediately, Madhavi, is to summon the relevant folk and ask them about their plans, and perhaps have a greater conversation, a broader conversation, a deeper conversation a more inclusive conversation on how we can perhaps agree, because the restructure is going to be based on implementation of the prior actions with the IMF, right? And if this number is to be, I don't know, I haven't seen the document, but if it is really the case, then we'll have to figure out how to proceed, because this is all, I mean, it's almost impossible. It's so tough to achieve that.
So, Doctor, one more thing. When it comes to income taxes, a lot of tax exemptions, a lot of laws facilitating tax exemptions, like difference laws introduced, such as the Strategic Development Projects Act, where exemptions have been granted. So, is there a possibility where the committee could intervene in preventing certain?
You see, I mean, I propose something called the blueprint out of the debt trap and towards sustainable inclusive development. Perhaps we can include this in this Twitter. I don't know if anybody can maybe download. I don't know whether that is possible.
Is this available?
Yeah. So we will give it to you in soft form. Okay. And your question, I have actually answered under revenue consolidation, where we say that here it says, formulate long-term stable tax policy with investment credits instead of tax incentives for FDI. Right, so we are proposing investment credits as opposed to just giving tax free. Right, so investment credit means you invest a $2 million and you get you can write off from your books, maybe up $2 million, maybe up to $4 million, depending on geographically where you go and invest it. You go and invest it in a very bad low, underdeveloped location in the country, you probably get greater than the $2 million tax credit that you invested. But so the thing is, it is linked to how much you bring in. Right. You may bring in hardly anything, and then you enjoy a tax holiday for 40 years, which is what can happen under the SDP. So here it says, halt giving out strategic development project status for new investments, right? The SDP, who will be subjected to pay 15% minimum alternative tax. So what I have suggested, right, is that take this out because too politicized, right, and have a minimum alternative tax of 15%, right? So my point earlier was also, don't put all these taxes on the poor people of this country, right? Put it in an equitable way where these people who don't pay taxes for 40 years be asked to pay 15% tax. They enjoy the assets that this country creates. You have to pay tax. I mean, if some people have residence in the UK or the US, how much tax do you pay in the UK or the US? Right? How come that you need tax break only in Sri Lanka? You see? So those are the things that need to change in RW's program, right? And these are the things that we would like to bring out. So it's a...
Yeah. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually reading all the LK Ask MP questions under the hashtag and trying to put it into one where I can, quickly put it across to you.
Yeah,
so
you have 5 more minutes. And then
5 more minutes. Tisura
done.
is also asking down the line the number of years CEB, CPC have been operating at a loss because they were selling below their cost of operations. So if I just put it in a nutshell, so this is about unsolidated bidding. So when it comes to foreign finances projects, so what powers does the committee have to...
Like I said, these unsolicited bids are outside the accepted tender process, right? and we see a lot of these projects are given on unsolicited basis. Somebody says, oh, I will bring $300 million and we will build a road, right? I will bring in $200 million and we shall build a stadium. Somebody says, I will bring $110 million and we will build the tallest tower in South Asia. And we did. Did this country ask for a $110 million idiotic tower? Nobody asked for it. Unsolicited. Who pays for it? What revenue has come through? So, yes, this culture of unsolicited projects must stop. We must have a program. We have a plan. We have a national physical plan. This is what we are going to do. Right? We want to have a LRT because that is what is going to help people both save energy and time and pollution and everything, and get to Battaramulla, get to Colombo from Battaramulla in 7 minutes as opposed to 70 minutes, right? So these are things that are contained in a well thought out plan, and suddenly this is removed and something else is done. So these are the things that need to change. So everything has to be solicited, right, and based on a plan. And there is something called the National Physical Plan. All that, and we are the National Planning Department. We are the External Resources Department. That's all supposed to work together. This country needs a system change. We need to hit the reset button. We can't go on like this, right? It has to change. It has to change. And I think that's what we are all trying to do.
Okay. So, Chairman, final thoughts before we wrap up. What do you have to say? Because we have a lot of...
Yeah, no, my thoughts is on this particular thing. I want to commend you guys for having thought about this. And I don't know how many people joined, but lots of people joined. And so many questions are coming. That just goes to show that there is interest in these types of things. I actually would like to know at the peak, how many people did we have?
We had 130 or 150, yeah.
150 people.
Yeah.
So that's a good number. Don't you think so?
Yes, it is. It is the highest side.
Yeah, that's a good number, right? So and then people can watch this later.
Yes, currently we have 115.
Lots more people will watch it later, and then they will share it, and it'll go to a big audience. So this is the kind of thing, the change in the system that young people want, and so therefore. We need to continue this. We need to improve this. We need to get more people onto this. You need to have more people sitting in this chair and answering questions about other things, about youth affairs, about women's issues, about human rights, and be bold. Don't say, let them ask any question. And let them answer, because that is in the spirit of democracy what we want. So I think this is a great start, and we should continue.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chairman, Dr. Harsh De Silva. So we had with us for quite some time. So thank you for your time. This is why the communication department is creating such platforms where you can directly engage with your representatives and actually question them and hold them accountable for their actions, because Parliament wants it to be more people-centric, and so we are reaching out. So thank you for your questions. I know that we could not take up all the questions due to the lack of time, but we will share the questions with the Honorable Chairman. So and his team, himself, as he said that he's tweeting most of the time, will look into it and respond accordingly. So we will catch you guys again with another interesting spaces session. So thank you for joining in, and we'll see you again.